In today's lesson, we are going to be looking at unit conversions. So this kind of plays off the idea of the previous lesson where we looked at the imperial system of measurement. We do want to learn about unit conversions in case we do need to convert between the different measurement systems, as well as even within the same measurement system. So we have seen that in both metric and imperial measurement systems, we can use different units of measurements depending on the size of the object being measured. For example, we may use millimeters to measure the thickness of a phone, but meters to measure the length of a room. If we need to combine measurements to calculate area or perimeter, for example, we need to make sure they have common units. Regardless of what we are converting, we'll be using a method called unit analysis, where we'll be using a unit rate. So we're going to talk just briefly about what unit analysis is and what a unit rate is. And you've seen unit rates before, but a unit rate is a ratio that compares X units of one quantity to 1 unit of another quantity. So essentially that's kind of like the formula, or that's kind of the comparison between two different units. We're told that unit X, or we're told how many millimeters are in 1 centimeter. We're told how many meters are in 1 kilometer. That's an example of a unit rate. How many centimeters in 1 inch, right? So the key thing is that it's the quantity of one unit compared to 1 unit of another quantity. And now when we use the unit analysis, our general formula is going to be the units we start with, or the units that we're given, multiplied by the units we have, or the units we want, divided by the units we have. And this bracket here, this entire thing here, center that a bit more. So this entire bracket, this fraction, comes from the unit rate. So we'll go through a couple of examples so we can get an idea of what that looks like. So we're just going to use some general conversions within the metric system itself. So we have all of our unit rates up top. 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. Now, it doesn't really matter which way it goes, which part of the unit or part of the ratio is the 1 unit. Right? It doesn't matter that we don't have one that has 1 millimeter or one that has, or I guess the other ones, they do have 1 meter and then 1 kilometer. Right? But it's okay if we don't have like kind of the reverse, right? How many meters are in 1 centimeter, or how many kilometers are in 1 meter. As long as we have a unit rate that has the units we're dealing with, that's okay. So again, just to remind ourselves that these are all unit rates, which I'm sure you have seen before. So now we're going to use them. So we are going to convert, or we want to convert 2.5 meters to centimeters. So we're going to start with the units we have. So we have 2.5 meters. We're going to multiply that by our unit rate, and the values that are going to go on top are the units we want. So we want, or we have meters, and we want centimeters. So using the unit rate with centimeters and meters up here, we're going to put centimeters on top, so 100 centimeters divided by 1 meter, and we just go through this calculation. So we could take 2.5 multiplied by 100 and divide by 1. So in this case, we get 250 centimeters. Now, you may have been able to do that already, no problem, using your understanding of how many centimeters are in a meter. If you prefer a more analytical, straightforward, kind of calculated way, you can use this formula. The next example, we want to convert 450 meters to kilometers. So we have meters again, and we want kilometers. So we're going to start with the meters we have, or the units we have, so 450 meters. We're going to multiply that by a unit rate. The unit rate, again, we're given, it's up here at the top. It is the one that has kilometers and meters. We're going to put the units we want on top, so 1 kilometer. Again, that comes right from the unit rate, divided by 1,000 meters, which again comes right from the unit rate. So this is just a calculation. So 450 times 1 divided by 1,000, we get 0.45, 45 kilometers. And that's essentially what a unit analysis is, or using unit analysis to convert between units. Final example, or at least in this section, we want to convert 125 millimeters to meters. Now in this case, we don't have anything that can get us, or we don't have a unit rate directly connecting millimeters to meters, which is okay, because what we can do is we can convert millimeters to centimeters and then centimeters to millimeters. So this is what we have. We want meters, but because we don't have a unit rate that has meters, we're going to have to do something a little different, like we mentioned. So we're going to start with 125 millimeters. We're going to multiply that by our first unit rate over here, dealing with centimeters and millimeters. So I'm going to multiply it by 1 centimeter. Those are the units I want, divided by the units I have, which is the 10 millimeters. So essentially 125 divided by 10, and we get 12.5 centimeters. Now we can take the 12.5 centimeters, multiply that by our unit rate connecting millimeters and centimeters, or sorry, meters and centimeters. I want meters, so from my unit rate, I'll leave that circled, 1 meter goes on top, 100 centimeters goes on the bottom, because those are the units I have. When we go through, 12.5 divided by 100, 0.125 meters. So that is how many meters 125 millimeters is, 0.125. Right, so in some cases you may have to convert to kind of an in-between unit before you get to the final one. Next, we're going to look at converting within the imperial system. So the two main unit rates that we're going to be dealing with, we kind of talked a bit about them in the previous lesson. 1 foot equals 12 inches, and 1 yard equals 3 feet. So again, like we previously mentioned, not the nicest conversions. It's not as nice as the metric system, but we are able to use unit rates to make these conversions. It's going to be the same type of setup, same type of format. So we want to convert 5 feet to inches. So 5 feet are the units we have, and we want inches. So we take the 5 feet, what we start with. We multiply that by a unit rate. Because we're dealing with feet and inches, we're going to take this unit rate, multiply by the 12 inches, the units we want, divided by the 1 foot, which is the units we have. So essentially this works out to just 5 times 12, which gives us 60 inches. For example 5, if we want to convert 6 feet 11 inches to inches, this one's a little bit different because the units we have is actually a combination, and part of it is the units we want. So when we have 6 feet 5 inches, or 6 feet 11 inches, really all we need to convert is the feet part and then add the 11 inches on after. So I'm going to take the 6 feet, I'm going to multiply it by 12 inches, the units we want, divided by 1 foot, the units we have. Again, that's just coming from the unit rate. So 6 times 12 is 72. But what we then need to do is take the 72 inches and add on, we'll use the quotation units, just so we don't confuse IN and then the plus sign with a T. So we're going to take the 72 inches, which is 6 feet. We're going to add on the 11 inches, and we get 83 inches overall. So again, a little bit different because the imperial system can combine units. We want to make sure that we're only converting the feet and then just adding on the inches to our answer. Example 6, converting feet to yards. So we have a unit rate looking at feet and yards. So we can start off with the units we have, which is 100 or 200 feet. And we want yards. So we're going to take the 200 feet, multiply it by the unit rate. We're going to put the yards on top because those are the units we want. Divided by 3 feet. Those are the units we have. So essentially this works out to 200 divided by 3. And we get 66.67 or 6.6 repeating yards. Example 7, similar to the last one on the previous slide, we want to convert 42 inches to feet and inches. So we're going to have to do this kind of in 2 steps. We're going to take the 42 inches, and we're going to convert that or see what does that work out to in feet. So 42 multiplied by 1 foot divided by 12 inches. Right, again, getting that from our unit rate at the top here. So 42 times 1 divided by 12, or 42 divided by 12, gives us 3.5. So right now we know we have 3 feet and half a foot. So what we can do, we know right now we have 3 feet. We need to figure out how much is half a foot in inches. Now there's different ways you could do this. You could figure out, okay, well, what does 3 feet actually work out to in inches? So 3 feet equals 36 inches, and figure out what the difference is. Let me use a different color. And then take 42 inches, which is our total, minus 36 inches. We get 6 inches in return. We could also take the 0.5 feet, multiply that by the unit rate of 12 inches over 1 foot, and get 6 inches, which we can then add into our final measurement or final conversion. Again, you may not even need to do that if you recognize that half a foot is 6 inches, if you know that kind of conversion already, because you remember that 12 inches is a foot. You may not even have to do any of these conversions, these additional ones that we see in purple. But if you don't, either way you choose to do it is okay. In the end, your final answer, though, should be 42 inches is equivalent to 3 feet, 6 inches. Lastly, we're going to look at converting within areas. Again, it's the same format, the same setup. You want to be careful, though, with the unit rates. The unit rates are not going to be identical to when we're dealing with just singular measurements. Because we're dealing with area, there are different unit rates. So you want to be careful of that when you're making these conversions. So 25 centimeters squared to millimeters squared. We do have a unit rate for that. 25 centimeters. So we have centimeters squared. We want meters squared. So we're going to start with the units we have. 25 centimeters squared. We're going to multiply that now by a unit rate. And on top, the unit rate is going to, or the top number is the units we want. So 100 millimeters squared divided by the units we have, 1 centimeter squared. 25 times 100, 2,500 millimeters squared is our final answer. For example 2, same idea, just a different unit rate. So the meters squared and the centimeters squared. So we have meters squared and we want centimeters squared. So 4.5 meters squared multiplied by, going to our unit rate now, we put our centimeters squared on top, so 10,000, divided by the 1 meter squared, units we have on the bottom. So 4.5 times 10,000 is 45,000 centimeters squared. Again, you may find easier ways to do this. You may be able to just look at the unit rate and figure out what you have to multiply or divide by. If not, again, you have this formula that can be used in any scenario when making unit conversions, regardless of what the units are, as long as you have a unit rate, which you would need anyways in order to make the conversions. And then lastly, last set of examples, second last set of examples, meters squared to kilometers. So again, we have a unit rate for that. Units we have, units we want. So 450,000 multiplied by a unit rate. We want kilometers squared on top, so 1 kilometer squared divided by 1,000,000 meters squared. So 450,000 divided by 1,000,000 equals 0.45 kilometers squared. The next one, meters squared to centimeters squared. So we have millimeters squared, we want centimeters squared. We do have a unit rate focusing on those units. Start with the ones you have. Multiply it by the unit rate where you're putting the units you want on top. Centimeters squared divided by 100 millimeters squared. So 400 divided by 100 works out to 4 centimeters squared. Then last two examples, again, it's the exact same idea, exact same format using the unit rates. So units we have multiplied by the units we want, so 1 meter squared divided by 10,000 centimeters squared. So 1,250 divided by 10,000 equals 0.125 meters squared. And lastly, 6.25 kilometers squared is what we have. We're going to multiply that by a unit rate, again, which we're given. Units we want, so 1,000,000 meters squared over 1 kilometer squared gives us 6,250,000 meters squared. So again, regardless of what situation we're dealing with, when we're using unit conversions, we can use the unit analysis where we use the unit rate and multiply that ratio by the units we have. Now you do have to arrange it specifically to make sure that the units you want in the unit rate are on top in your ratio or your fraction, and the units you have are the ones on the bottom. But again, as long as you're given the unit rate, this kind of formula will apply. You can also, again, you would be given the unit rate, right? I wouldn't expect you to know that 1 kilometer squared equals 1,000,000 meters squared. Right? There are some obvious ones that you probably should know just from constant use, like the 10 millimeters into 1 centimeter, 100 centimeters into a meter, even the 12 inches in a foot. Right? Those are some common ones that from using them repetitively, you should kind of know them already. But again, you would be given the unit rates in order to find or to solve these types of questions. So as long as you understand what the unit analysis is, that specific formula, the units we start with or the units we have, multiplied by the unit rate, where we put the units we want on top, divided by the units we have, simple calculation gives us our unit conversion.